Well, hey, Steve, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks for having me back, Dr. Jockers.
Absolutely. Well, I always enjoy our conversations. And last time, guys, if you missed it, you definitely want to check out episode 178. Steve and I talked all about optimizing stomach acid. I get so many questions from people about stomach acid reflux. We talked about digestive enzymes. We talked about postbiotics, butyric acid. We talked about a lot of strategies to support the microbiome. And we're going to talk more about gut health and how it relates to immune health today. But if you have questions about stomach acid, bile flow, enzymes, how to really recondition the gut microbiome, that is the episode to go to. That is a deep dive there. So with that said, today is about the immune system and how the gut and the microbiome really connects to the immune system. So Steve, let's start by just talking about the immune system. And obviously it's a complex system, and it really came into light with COVID and everything that's gone on over the last few years. So people started actually paying attention to the immune system and wanting to know more about it. So I know you're an expert here. And so let's talk a little bit about how the immune system works.
Yeah. So I think one thing that really helps me is I'm a visual type of learner and a visual guy. And I was really struggling with trying to conceptualize the immune system because I think all the diagrams I always saw was like, it's like, head to toe coverage of your body is the immune system. And that's true. But then if you look in the research, they say that 70 to 80% of all of your immune cells are in and surrounding your gut. And so I think it's helpful to kind of picture if you only had like 100 cells, like in a video game or something, you only had 100 units of immunity to spread throughout your body, you'd be stacking like 70 to 80%, like right around your intestines. So you're like, that's where the majority of the ongoing daily activity and protection is. And so I think that's useful for people just to picture where the majority of the activity is. And then like you said, everybody's like very interested more about the immune system. And I am by no means like a super immune expert. I'm more of like the interplay between the gut and the immune. But I found it really fascinating to learn a lot more about antibodies this year and last year, and how we have basically two sides of the immune system. We have the innate and then the adaptive, and then we have the cross communication between the two. And so that what that does is presents us with several potential breakpoints in how our immunity works. We could have an innate immune system, which is mostly like your inflammation. It's like the first responder. So in the first 48 hours of an infection or even a pollen dump, we were talking about earlier before. This is the first line of cells. A lot of white blood cells, natural killer cells, if you hear about those, secretory IgA, if you hear about that. That's kind of your innate rushing to it, along with inflammation. If you sprain your ankle or you do something to your knee, the heat and the fever, all that's like innate. And then you have adaptive on the other side. And that's where we get into the really cool stuff around antibodies. People may have heard about B cells and how like antibodies aren't the only way that you can have like lasting immunity towards infections or whatever might have come into your body. And that takes longer to develop. Basically, your innate immune system is the first responders. They collect a bunch of data and they're supposed to transfer it over to the adaptive side. And that adaptive side learns over time and then kind of starts building. I don't know, war always ends up being my metaphor. I don't know, it's really sad what's going on right now in Ukraine and everything, but it's the one that makes sense. They basically start manufacturing the specialized like bullets and munitions needed to respond to an ongoing threat that the innate system has detected and basically said is still ongoing. And so I think that interplay is really exciting. I think it also gives us a framework to talk about how we can get dysfunctional, which is, I think, a big thing that I've learned over the last few years is like, everybody's like, I want strong immunity. I want strong immunity. But if we're already out of if we're already out of alignment and we get stronger out of alignment, we're just more out of alignment. We actually want a smart immune system, one that's really basically adapted to whatever is coming at it. And if it has to be strong, it's strong. If it has to be passive, it's passive. And I think that's where I've evolved in my thinking is like strong's not always better. We actually want something that's very smart and in tune with our environment.
Yeah, I like that. I always use the example of like a dartboard, and your immune system is like the person throwing the dart. doesn't really matter how hard they throw the dart. It's really about their coordination and their accuracy, right? Like you could throw the dart as hard as you want. If you're coordinated, that's great. If not, you're going to, smoke a hole in your wall, right? And, hurt yourself. And that's kind of the issue here is most people they have malcoordinated immune systems. So their immune systems are coordinated to really efficiently attack the pathogens. And instead, it's also, it's trying to attack the pathogens, maybe getting a percentage of them, but it's also taking some of your own tissue and damaging some of your own tissue with kind of a systemic inflammatory response. And so we're in alignment there as far as this idea of like, hey, immune coordination is really the key. Immune balance is so important. And, you talked about how the gut, most people, like if you were to ask somebody on the street, like, where is the immune system in your body? Like where, what organ system, like what organ is the immune system in? Most people don't know. Right.
Right.
And so just like you talked about, most of it's in the gut. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's helpful when we talk about like, why does gut health matter for immunity? Like, why are we seeing so many linkages, whether it's autoimmune conditions or asthma or hay fever, or even, flu and viruses? It's the entry point and the regulation of the immune system is heavily influenced by what's happening in the gut.
Yeah, absolutely. So important. So I know as you were looking at this and you were researching, you came across these plasmacytoid dendritic cells, right? So it kind of short for PDCs, plasmacytoid dendritic cells. Very interesting. What do they do?
So these are a specialty subgroup, kind of a rare dendritic cell, and they're kind of like the commanders of the immune system. They actually are able to influence both the adaptive and the innate immune system at the same time, which is actually extremely rare. We kind of talked earlier how you need to have a good crosstalk. Like basically on a battlefield, if one unit's doing one thing and another unit thinks it should be doing something else, friendly fire can happen. That's autoimmune conditions. That's extreme reactions to pollen, things like that. So you need coordination on what's happening in the plasma. I always say that. So
it's tough to say. Here, I'll PDCs, because it's plasmacytoid dendritic cells.
Yeah. So the PDCs sort of are able to regulate on both sides and help the crosstalk between them. They're able to boost natural killer cells if the innate immunity is like not responding well or needs more power. And then they're able to influence like T cells and B cells on the adaptive side. So they're really cool, and they're kind of a new emerging thing. They're coming into their own over the last 10 years or so. But prior to this, there hasn't been, I don't think, that much differentiation in dendritic cells.
Yeah, very interesting. And then what did you find as far as, because this is interesting, we've talked about probiotics before. I mean, probiotics are something that's very well known in the natural health space. I imagine all my listeners have heard of probiotics. Most of them have tried probiotics or maybe taking probiotics right now. And the average person out there, when they think about probiotics, they think about putting living organisms in their body that, will crowd out and help get rid of bad stuff in there and help with, optimizing nutrient assimilation. However, you found kind of this new area that's emerging, and it's called paraprobiotics. In particular, it's these kind of deadened or killed probiotics. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I was just doing research because I wanted to have the best protection over the last few years. I wanted my family to have the best protection, and so I was trying to find the right probiotic strains for gut immunity. I figured there had to be some studies there, and there are some, but over and over, these paraprobiotics kept turning up as being like way more powerful and like way more studied, both in animals and in humans, for immune system regulation. And it's basically this idea that if you're culturing a probiotic or a bacteria, it looks differently and it has different properties as it grows from, say, just nothing to a full adult. Let's call that a probiotic cell when it's a full adult. And what they found is if they stalled the growth at certain points and killed it off, that the bacterial wall and the stuff inside of it was different, and that actually interacted with our body in a way that was much more promotive to immune function. And so they basically just wait and they figure out when is the best time to kill off this life cycle. They heat kill these bugs, which are often sometimes even the same bugs you'd use in the adult form for probiotics, but they kill them earlier, and then they're also shelf stable, and you can do a lot more stuff with them because of that. So in the end, it appears that the cell wall and the stuff inside the cell at that stage are more impactful for the gut immune connection than the adult version of them.
Yeah, very, very interesting. And, when we look at like stool analysis and things like that, we're not typically seeing like a big, for example, if you take certain probiotic strains, we don't always see them showing up in high amounts when we look at stool analysis. People, we really don't have the science fully figured out on how probiotics work to begin with, right? We know based on research, they're well studied to work, right? To improve, IBS, a lot of different conditions, a lot of gut inflammation related conditions, improving nutrient absorption, immune function, things like that. But we don't necessarily fully understand the mechanism. And so it may just be, again, this cell wall, having a certain reaction. And I know that you guys found a strain. It is Lactococcus lactis strain plasma, or LC plasma, right? And can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, LC plasma has, I think, over 25, maybe up to 27 studies now in humans. And it's this really cool strain that is a paraprobiotic. So it's killed off early. And this company has done a lot of research on it. They've trademarked it, and that's why there's so many studies on it. But it's really cool in that it appears to do many of the things as good or better than probiotics. For instance, they actually studied it in athletes. They're like, hey, how do athletes do with this? And it turns out they have less time or more time to fatigue. They have less, they tested it for like sick days. There's less sick days. And then they tested it on other things. I can't say that this treats anything, but they did see better responses to the flu while taking it. And it is the one strain that preferentially upregulates and activates these PDC cells. And so that's the mechanism behind it that they discovered. And I think part of the reason why it works so well for all types of things, whether it's just general immunity and well-being to, better performance under stress, resistance to stress, and then regulation of the two sides of the immune system. So it's a really cool strain. And like you said, I think we're just barely scratching the surface here of what is actually happening with probiotics and paraprobiotics. But I think what's really true is that we're going to find over the next 5 years that the exact strain and the exact dosage of that exact strain are going to be the tickets to having like remarkable products and remarkable results.
So you think that we'll get very, very specific with certain probiotics and knowing better what kind of conditions they can help treat and help improve.
Yeah. I think the future, I think we've gone through 2 phases of probiotics. And then I think the third phase is just kicking off. The first phase was like throw 10 to 20 different types in there. They're not specific, and like just crank up the billions, 50 billion, 100 billion, 300 billion. And that was first level probiotics. And those did well for some people, but not everybody. Then the next phase was like more targeted strains. And this is when like spore biotics and S. boulardii really took off. Yep. And those seem to help more. I would wager to say that that's what you found. That's definitely what I found, is that more people responded to these specific types of spore biotics and or certain strains like Lactobacillus GG, Rhamnosus GG has a ton of data on it. It's a really cool strain. And so we saw these strains start to be like, hey, it's about the strain, it's about the dosage, and it works for everything. And now what we're going to see, and what the research at least shows anyways, is that it's that strain and that dosage for a certain issue. It could be skin, it could be brain function, anxiety, depression, it could be gut function, with certain strains being better for diarrhea, certain strains being better for constipation. And so as we move into better understanding the mechanism of action and getting more data on these probiotics, I think the difference between live and dead is going to matter less and less. And it's going to be more about that specific strain matched to the specific type of symptom or condition you're trying to modify for.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And that, kind of goes into the idea of personalized medicine or personalized healthcare, which is really what we try to do in functional healthcare to begin with. Functional medicine, functional nutrition is trying to understand somebody's unique genetics, their unique symptoms, triggers, food triggers, stress triggers, things like that, and trying to customize a specific plan for them. And so, with the gut microbiome playing such a big role in health, it makes sense that if we're adding in probiotics, we're adding in kind of these major players, that we should be as specific as possible. So I'm looking forward to learning more about that research and how it's been unfolding, but really, just seeing how it continues to unfold over the next several years and better understanding that. So I know obviously you guys created this Holo-Immune product, and you put the what is it? The Lactococcus lactis strain, the plasma strain, which has a brand name Amuse because it's been studied and clinically studied to show a lot of benefits in there. You've got that in there, but you've also got some other things in there as well, some other different types of probiotics. You've got beta glucan in there, which is a really powerful polysaccharide that's amazing for as a kind of a prebiotic, or it really supports the immune system, supports your secretory IgA levels. So tell us more about this product right here you guys created.
Yeah, my goal was really to try to create a product that was capable of retraining immune systems to be smarter. And so in the beginning, we talked about the two sides and the cross communication. Well, you could be not able to mount a effective innate response. So you could have too passive an innate immune system. This would be like if you saw low secretory IgA on a stool panel or something like that. You could also have too aggressive of that pattern. Like you could just all out war every time you eat a tomato or beef or something. Like that's not supposed to happen. And then you could have a crosstalk issue between innate and adaptive. And then on the adaptive side, you could be generating way too much activity and be in like an autoimmune state, or you could be actually depressed. So immunocompromised and elderly people struggle to actually remember and create the right amount of antibodies and things like that to mount effective responses in the future to whatever has already happened to them. And so I wanted to make a product that could try to basically cover all 5 of those patterns, because as far as I understand, there's no good testing to try to like map this out. Like, where is your immune system today? If someone's like, okay, cool, now I know more, I want to get a test to find out what's happening. And like, I haven't figured out a good way to find those data points out or that numbers out. Hopefully in the next 10 years, science, gives us something as humans so we can map more about which part of our immune system is out of balance. But being that we don't know, I wanted to try to create a product that was adaptogenic to whatever scenario is already present. And so, as you mentioned, the first thing I thought of was beta glucans, because they really are like an immune system, like super trainer. They kind of make it more effective. They help boost the secretory IgA. They're a mild prebiotic that most people can tolerate, which should, encourage a little bit better gut microbiome. And then the other 3 strains were selected based on their clinical data, both in animals and humans, because I wanted something that crossed both sides. And I really wanted to put a focus on the Th1 and Th2 balance inside the body, because I think a lot of us who struggle with chronic health issues, chronic gut and immune issues, we really have, we might have those other dysfunctions for sure. Maybe they're mild, but the Th1, Th2 stuff can get someone stuck in a bad way for a long time. And so the L92 and the Immuno LP20 both have data and mechanism of actions around boosting T helper cells. And T helper cells basically help the balance between Th1 and Th2. And so Th1 basically is people in the research that's linked to autoimmune conditions. If you have too much Th1, and then too much Th2 is typically linked to like hay fever and seasonal allergies. And what you want is it should be like a teeter totter that's like kind of moving. you don't want a violent teeter totter. You know, you don't want a bunch of like 8-year-old boys trying to launch each other up in the air, because if that's your experience inside your body, you're going to probably have wild swings of symptomology. You may have an autoimmune condition, but have extreme pollen reactions or other environmental issues. And you can dump all the vitamins and minerals into a body like that you want. They're not necessarily bad, but they're not going to dampen the teeter totter. And what will dampen the teeter totter is T helper cells and better T cell regulation and differentiation. And so that's why the other strains were chosen, because I also want to like be the future of what I just talked about with probiotics, that like, hey, the best thing is things that are studied and we can put data points on, and we can begin to build theories around how they're actually working inside the body.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I was telling you, I've been taking this holoimmune product here this spring, and I have poor histamine metabolism. And oftentimes around when the pollen dump, I don't usually express, the typical histamine intolerance symptoms like a lot of people do, where they'll have rashes, a lot of redness in their skin, headaches, migraines, different issues like that. Lots of postnasal drip can be a common symptom with it, having to clear their nose all the time, watery eyes, things like that. I don't typically display that, but when the pollen comes out and the humidity picks up, I usually notice a lot of fatigue. Like it's all of a sudden it's like, oh, fatigue. I don't sleep as well. And so just genetically, I found that it's most likely related to this sort of histamine issue. And when we're dealing with pollen or environmental irritants, that can drive up part of our immune system that's associated with histamine. And mast cell formation. And so taking the holoimmune along with things like vitamin C and making sure my vitamin D is optimized and zinc and things like that, quercetin, I've definitely noticed an improvement, not nearly as much of an energy swing with the pollen. We just had a huge dump out here in Georgia. And I mean, it's everywhere, every car is covered in it. And I felt good. I felt like, my normal self, maybe 5 to 10% reduction in energy, not thriving, not at my highest level, but not like the normal, 40 to 50% drop. Right. And so I'll take that. I'll take 5 to 10%, for a few days when the pollen comes out. And I really think the holoimmune is helping balance and optimize my immune system, so my body doesn't have to produce as much mast cells and as much of an inflammatory response when I'm exposed to the pollen. So really, really good stuff. I'm glad that you guys created this product. And I think it's awesome. I think people should definitely try it to support the immune system. What are some other nutrients outside of the holoimmune that you found to be very helpful for immune function?
I just want to comment on that for 1 second. So I think what you said there is super important, because people are often, I think, confused as to why would you be fatigued? Like, how does mast cells in the brain? And so, we don't understand it yet, but there's a very complex interaction between your neuroimmune system and basically, so that means like brain immune. And so there's actually like a brain immune gut triangle here that is all interconnected. And so if, like you said in the past, like you had a pollen dump and you produced a bunch of histamine, you would probably produce a bunch of inflammatory cytokines of different types. And those just travel through the blood. And if there's more of them, they will end up in your brain and typically cause like a mild neuroinflammation. And so what we're seeing with users of the product, and it's not everyone, in fact, it's not me. I wish it was me, but it's not me. But my soon-to-be wife actually is like, this is the one product, like she's like fighting me. I'm like, where's the bottle at? I want mine, because she's seeing cognitive. It's like almost like a nootropic for her.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that with like 30 to 40% of people who are using it, where they're like, wow, like this gets me turned on. I need less coffee and I'm ready to go for the day. Now, I wish I got that benefit, but I don't. But it's really cool that we're starting to see these interplays between, if we can reduce the cytokines inside the gut, if we can reduce the histamine release, then we see it in the brain, we can see it in the joints, these various other areas that the low grade inflammation may be like settling or traveling to.
Yeah, that's really good, really fascinating. And yeah, you're absolutely right. When we're noticing fatigue, we know that issues like chronic fatigue, for example, are associated with that inflammation, and it impacts hypothalamus, pituitary gland, right? This sort of neuroendocrine system that is associated with delivering the right hormones to help you feel energized and signaling to the mitochondria to produce energy, right? And so we start to see, the mitochondria going into more of like a defense mode, right? And protecting themselves because inflammation's high, and there's environmental irritants that are in the bloodstream that the cells themselves are saying, okay, wow, we got too much toxicity in our body, pathogens. And so we need to shut down energy production. We need to turn up oxidation and stress and inflammation. And for some people, they notice that as pain, right? They have a lot of pain. For other people, a lot of skin issues, right? Or gut issues. And then for other people, they're noticing it with fatigue. And so, each person responds a little bit differently, but you're absolutely right. This is all part of kind of this complex inflammatory process that's taking place. Now, again, the Holo-Immune, guys, definitely want to check it out. I talked about it in the intro, but again, the link here is healthygut.com/drjockers. Use a coupon code drjockers15 at checkout if you want to try this out. That'll get you the Holo-Immune, especially if you're noticing, again, allergy-like responses. If you feel like you're getting frequent colds, fevers, flus, definitely you want to support that gut microbiome. This is the most researched product I've seen for gut, specifically working on the gut to improve the immune function. So definitely check that out. What are some other nutrients, though, people should be looking at when it comes to supporting and optimizing their immune coordination?
So I think that, you've already mentioned some of the core basics, which is like vitamin D. You got to have your vitamin D levels up. Vitamin C is super important. Zinc. Some people overlook selenium. Selenium is a core nutrient to proper immune function and in fighting off infections and things like that.
Yeah.
I think there's an underrated tool that most people don't know about, which is melatonin for the immune system. So taking higher doses of melatonin is actually used in cancer, and part of the reason there is what it's doing to the immune system. Taking like they use really high dosages, like 160 to 180 milligrams, even higher than that sometimes. But taking less than that, like 10 or 20 milligrams, or even higher, sometimes under acute infections, can be very supportive to fighting your way out of an immune reaction as well. So that's a really underrated one. And then everything you do to keep your gut healthier is going to put you in a better position. And so if you you don't have enough butyrate, you got to get your prebiotics up or your fibers up, or take a product like our Tributyrin X or a different liquid tributyrin product. Butyrate is a big time regulation of basically the steps before your immune system gets triggered. So your immune system really shouldn't be getting bombarded by the food you eat and the bugs and the toxins that are inside your body all day long. You should have a really thick mucus layer, and then the cells behind the mucus layer should be like tight and really flexible to open and close. And when the mucus layer gets thinned and the cells stay open, that's leaky gut. And butyrate is one of the best ways to avoid leaky gut or get rid of leaky gut if you do have it. And so you can use things like resistant starch. You can use partialized hydrolyzed guar gum. And then, like I said, if you can't do those things, you can use supplemental butyrate supplements. But I think that's super underrated, especially for the histamine folks as well.
Yeah, that's great. That's another product actually I've been taking as well, is the butyric acid, Tributyrin X. And so yeah, great products, really good stuff. Guys, check it out, healthygut.com. That is Steve's company. Very revolutionary company, a lot of really awesome products. They've got a great stomach acid product, HCl Guard. They've also got Holo enzymes, right, or Holozymes, and the Tributyrin X, which is the butyric acid, as well as the Holo-Immune. So definitely check that out, guys. Steve, any last words of inspiration for our audience here?
Just know that, if you're struggling, that there's companies like ours out there that are fighting new products to market, and that dosage really matters. So if you use any of our products, you don't get a good result, please make contact with us. We have health coaches on staff to try to help you. You might need 2 pills, you might need less pills. And the same is true for anything else you have in your supplement cabinet. Please work with your health provider, your doctor, obviously, to verify that you should be going up and down. But if they don't know that you can, say, double or triple your enzymes, or take enzymes on an empty stomach to help with inflammation, then maybe find a new doctor who does, because you can do a lot with dosages when it comes to supplements if you're struggling.
Awesome. Thanks again for your time, Steve. Guys, hopefully you enjoyed this podcast, and please share this with somebody that you know, that you care about. When you share it, that really helps us impact more people and change more lives. So thanks for doing that. And we'll see you guys on a future podcast. Be blessed, everybody.